And that's how people pleasing came about. And I started learning about that because back then it was just fight, flight, freeze. But then they started realizing, hey, wait a second, we have fun, we have appeasing, we have people pleasing. And so, this whole people pleasing thing started coming about as well. And I said, okay. And then looking at my audience, at my population of who I was helping, I noticed that was one of the biggest issues. And then I reflected within myself as well.
When I was getting married, I remember the pastor saying to us, be careful that you don't lose who you are in the relationship. And the further along I get in my marriage, it really resonates with me. And I remember that, how important it is to be true to ourselves, to maintain our independence, and how we can be good for each other people, as we are true to ourselves. And it's not an easy thing to do, right? The longer you're in a relationship, the easier it is to get enmeshed and kind of lose that sense of self, right? You kind of blur together. And it's important to kind of stay in tune with what's important to you, what fills your cup, as well as expressing your needs and maintaining open communication with not just your partner, but with people in general, others in a relationship, really, about protecting our sense of self and what we know keeps us charged and happy in life. So today I'm honored and privileged to have our special guest on today, Anita Sandoval. It's a licensed professional counselor. She's an EMDR-certified therapist and neurobiology expert with over 14 years of experience. She's the founder of Positive Awakenings Counseling Center and the host of the podcast Empowering Women in Conversations. Anita is passionate about helping women break free from people-pleasing and generational trauma, empowering them to live authentically and resiliently. Through her Empower Her Pathways program, she provides guidance and tools to support women in overcoming relationship struggles and self-doubt. Anita is also the author of Broken Chains: How I Broke the Cycle of Abuse and Neglect and Went from Victim to Survivor, a deeply personal journey of healing and empowerment. So this is going to be a great conversation. Be sure you don't miss a minute. And without further ado, let's meet Anita. Hello, Anita. How are you? And welcome to the Mental Health Toolbox.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and just chat with your audience.
It's an honor to have you. And we go way back. We have the same mastermind together. It's really fun to kind of be two therapists in the podcasting space. We were just chewing the fat before, talking about how great it is to see other therapists using a platform like this to really help each other out, other therapists listening in, as well as consumers of mental health, and just to use this platform to share our insights into human behavior and how we can all live our best lives. None of us are an expert in everything, but when we come together, we can certainly share our nuggets of wisdom and help each other out. So very happy that Anita's willing to donate her time today to this cause. And we're going to learn all about the wonderful work she is doing. Now, we do believe in tools up front here at the Mental Health Toolbox. So I'd like to share with you just where you can find out the work she's doing, take some notes. If you check out her website at anitasandoval.com, you'll see the wonderful work she is doing here and all of her links, of course, as well as her free resource library if you sign up to her newsletter. You can find her podcast on here, as well as the work she's doing. If you have any more questions, there's her awesome book, Broken Chains. It's going on my reading list here pretty quick. She has a YouTube channel, Anita Sandoval, and you can find her on LinkedIn, as well as the podcast page and Instagram. So anywhere you want to find her, I will make sure to link all of this up into the show notes. So you can always connect with Anita when you're ready. All right. So Anita, thank you so much for being on today. I'm excited to hear about how you got into this space with empowering women and specifically addressing people-pleasing behavior. I think this is a great topic for therapists to brush up on because I don't know about other therapists. I get a lot of this type of clientele in my office, and it affects relationships and also self-esteem and learning how to communicate needs and boundaries in a relationship. Very important stuff. So why don't you share a little bit about, how you got into this space and why you chose to niche down?
Definitely. Thank you. So, I mean, that was like a big loaded question. How did I get here? It's like, oh, when did I start my path? And to be honest, I feel that my journey in my childhood growing up in a broken home helped me to be where I'm at today. So I know a lot of people assume that, oh, this thing happened to me, this trauma, and now I can't, overcame it, whatever, healed, and let's move forward. Well, I wanted to use what I learned from this experience to help others so that they don't have to get stuck in the same situation and they don't have to go through all the trials, tribulations, challenges, but first and foremost to know that they're not alone, they're supported. And the one thing that my patients normally with the first session, what they tell me is, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy. Because they think all these things, these thoughts of like, is this normal? Is this not normal? What am I doing? Is there something wrong with me? And when I explain to them their behaviors, their thoughts, how everything is just common and that no, they're not crazy, that sigh of relief comes up from them like, oh, thank you. Someone finally validated and heard me. So, yeah. Okay, so how did I start? Just knowing in general psychology, when I entered the college, I knew that I did not want to go into the medical field, blood, bodily fluids. Oh my gosh, no. And so, but I did know I wanted to help people. And so mental health was something that I was kind of venturing into. Big thing for therapists is know your why. If you want to go to psychology or counseling or anything in the mental health field, don't do it because you want to fix yourself. If you want to do it, you need to do it for other reasons. If you want to work on you, guess what? That's why there's therapy. That's why there's support groups. But if you're starting meshing yourself and your problems and wanting to go and help others, more than likely there's going to be that transference, and then the validity and success in therapy won't be as highly successful. So that's tip number one. I knew for sure that I needed to be healed. I needed to make sure that my reasoning for going into counseling or in this aspect was for the right reasons. And that was really just to help people to know that there is another way of looking at things and moving forward because I've already been there. So then once I went to the route of actually wanted to be in psychology, and I was like, okay, well, I like psychology, but I love sociology too, which is the study of human behavior and the study of the mind. I knew through classes I did not want to be a researcher per se, just doing reports. I wanted to be with people. And so when I got my degree, I also became a school counselor, high school and middle school. I also was a teacher. So in teaching, I knew, nope, this isn't for me. Working with a lot of kids, I want it one-on-one. During the intern process going to school, I made sure that I went through different routes, such as a substance abuse facility, private practice. I went into the government also within juvenile. You want to be able to touch foot of every little part so you could get to know a little bit about yourself, of what you want to do and not to do. So then for me, because I was a single mom at that time, I knew that I needed to do something more one-on-one where I could set my hours more flexible, but still help people. So once you graduate, get your master's, you got your license, you're doing all of that. And, lo and behold, I ended up getting remarried. And I said, well, luckily you want to be able to have support with someone because starting a business, starting a private practice, it's really hard. Luckily now we have the internet. We have here Patrick that helps also, people get started. I mean, we didn't have that back then. I had to just
Right.
like get
Right.
books. I don't know. Did you have that, Patrick? How did you?
That's a It's great that you bring this up. It's just fun to hear the validation on
Yeah.
many touch points here because I was also I had never intended to go into social work. It was or therapy. Like it wasn't on my radar. I wanted to be a pharmacist, and so
Wow.
it's funny
Yeah.
because I wasn't very good at math or science. I just didn't want to be poor.
Yeah.
So I fell in love with sociology though in undergrad, and after I finished pre-med and everything, I was like, whoa, I love sociology. I love people. Why do I want to be a pharmacist and be stuck behind a desk somewhere?
Yeah.
And then after some exploration and some advice, I looked into social work and pivoted. And it was for what I feel is a great fit, but like you said, for the right reasons,
Mhm.
because I love to help people. I love to help people who are stuck. And I grew up with such an unorthodox life, and I learned how to be
Yeah.
scrappy and think outside the box. And
Yeah.
I know that where you start in life doesn't determine where you end up, and that you can
Yeah.
recreate yourself at any
Yeah.
point that you want.
Yeah.
That it's not linear. And so that's my why.
Yes.
I love to help people get unstuck that way and get past their own limiting beliefs about what could be in their future and sense of purpose. And
Yeah.
but it started with sociology, so love it.
Yes, just like me. Definitely. I
Right,
love that. Yeah, I know. No wonder we get along so well.
right. But when it came to the
Yeah.
private practice thing, I started the telehealth stuff before it was a thing when it was still
Me
taboo.
too. In 2016. Oh, and
Yep.
they looked at me like I was crazy. Other
Right.
therapists, yes, other therapists would tell me, "So how's that online thing
Yeah.
going?" And I'm like, "It's a thing." And even when I was getting my EMDR training, I was like, "Hey, do you have anything online? Because I see patients online." I'm like, "Yeah, no, it's not going to be a thing." Boom, COVID happened within that month. I'm like, "There you
Right.
go."
See. See.
Yes. Wow.
It's funny how the world works, but I do believe in the benefit of being creative and exploring different avenues and opening other doors because you never know where it's going to lead, right? I think it's
Definitely.
what's sometimes called the 20% rule.
Mhm.
Have some playroom, and I think the best inventions come from that. Look at
Yeah.
Google, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think YouTube was that. It was a playground of like they give them like percentage of time just to play around with ideas and stuff, and just a number
Mhm.
of things come from that. You think the iPhone was the same thing with Apple. It was came from a playroom. Playroom is important.
Yeah.
To entertain our ideas, and if something doesn't work, it doesn't work. That's fine. But we never know what's going to come of it.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
studies do show that people change their careers at least 3 to 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
So if for me, I had started younger as a medical assistant and phlebotomist, and then I remember working in the hospital, and I was just like, "Ugh, not for me." And that's how I pivoted too. I was like, "Nope, not going to be a nurse, not going to be a no, 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 no." And like I said, and even then, when you get your degree, they're not going to tell you what other things are going to be where you're going to niche into. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, it was like, oh yeah, okay, well, counseling, whatever, right? And you start in and you start seeing the issues that come in, and you're like, wait a second, okay, so first of all, what modality are you going to use? And they give you all these modalities, but you now have to figure out what is your body going to gravitate to? What is your mind really, wanting to use?
Mm-hmm.
And then just learn that, because if you want, I remember I used to say, oh, existential therapist, I'll just do a little bit of this and that when I was beginning. And now I'm just like, oh, no, no, no. Going on, this year will be my 15th year. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I was what? And, my, my teacher, when I was getting my master's, he told me it's going to take about 10 years before you become really seasoned in what you're doing. And back then I was just like, oh, 10 years. Oh my God. But no, yeah, I get it now, to know. And still, we don't know it all because we have to do the CEUs, continuing education. And so knowing little by little, when the patients come in, what is your style that you turn to? What is the style that you like? Going into the continuing education, you start going, okay, yeah, this isn't for me. Client-centered was not for me. I'm ADHD. And so me just talking, no, I need to be like, okay, what's the problem? Let's go do this. We can do that. And so I gravitated towards CBT. Reality therapy, where things don't function back then. I mean, things function back then, your behaviors, but they don't function right now. And then CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, how your thoughts affect your behaviors. And so I really just gravitated to those two. But then, what ended up happening was, yeah, I liked it. Everything was going great. But I felt like there was needing more because I was having some patients come in, mostly the PTSD, complex trauma, and it just it wasn't working. And I'm like, okay, what's happening? And or it was slow, or it was stuck. And I had to, consult, which by the way is huge. If we don't, you need to consult with other therapists. There's no way you can do it alone. Hence why I feel like me and Patrick, I'm like, yes, I found someone else, it's because it's so different, we have, and luckily we have now the online where we can do support groups and chat groups and consultation groups. So amazing. And so what ended up happening, I remember just researching and listening to other podcasts. And this one person, I want to say was Bruce Lipton. He's also an MD. And he said, oh, EMDR really helped me. And I'm like, what is this EMDR? And I started researching it and thinking, oh my gosh, how have I not heard about this? And well, I live in a little town here, South Texas, Rio Grande Valley, very, very little. So it's not a real big and innovative. And so I always felt so alone here. But hey, it is what it is. I need to always enrich my mind. And, the closest was in Austin, which is 5 hours away. And I said, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to do it and invested the money because it's expensive, but then you have to look at the investment. And EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, that is where we can utilize visual stimulation, tones, tactiles to help disturbing images from the left side of the brain, from the right side of the brain to become processed. It kind of just like moves over, but we use bilateral stimulation, which is like a two-tone. So think of it as like one step in the past and one step in the present. We're telling the body, hey, we're here, so we can go ahead and get access into the memory bank of those memories so that disturbing images that goes within the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, gets relieved. So then it just becomes a memory, and the body, the nervous system, doesn't react towards it. And so when I found out that you actually use it where less amount of sessions to be able to help and treat the patient, and that other celebrities would use it. World Health Organization approved it, international, the Veterans Affairs, and Europe uses it. I was just like, okay, no, I'm sold. And
Yeah, I think EMDR is definitely one of the most backed evidence-based practices there has, that's out there. It's been around for a while. It's still kind of
yes,
the main thing for things like PTSD, and there's other forms like brain spotting and
I
prolonged
heard of that.
exposure, but EMDR is still a king,
Yeah.
when it comes to, and
Yes.
it's not just for trauma, right? It
No,
can
no,
be for a
no.
number of things.
Yeah, anxiety, depression, addictions, eating disorders, but there's, of course, because there's a special diagnoses, they have special protocols for them. It's not just, cut, but that's where the training comes in. And so that's normally what I focus on. Now, what I introduced with it is the IFS, which is called Internal Family Systems. I'm kind of new with it, but I love it. And I even told another therapist when we consulted last week, how did I not know of this? Like, oh my gosh, so this is where I tell the new therapists, get to know what's in. I mean, EMDR has been in for 30 years, over 30 years. And I just found out, in 2018. How did I not know this? And so being able to just continue to see what else is out there, because you never know. And so IFS talks about parts work. And it's like Patrick, like you say, different, same name or different names, same packaging. It's just, they change it up. And so it's more of defense mechanisms because of what happened with, let's say, caregivers growing up or trauma. Your body develops defense mechanisms. So whenever we say that word to patients, defense mechanism, they're like, oh, no, I have none. I'm good. I'm good.
Right.
Right? It's
Yeah.
like, I
You're
don't
like,
want
that
to
was one
talk.
right there. No,
Yeah, I
you're
know,
deflecting.
right? I know. I literally would have patients come in and going, my partner wants me to come in. I don't know why. I think I'm fine. They're the problems, but and I'm just like, okay, and that's a part. And so, yeah, we develop defense mechanisms. We call them parts work, and there's different types of parts. We have the healthy part. We have the vulnerable part. That's the traumatic exile part. Then we have the protectors, which are the managers, and the firefighters. Some are like, okay, like the type A, people pleasing. Those are the protectors that protect against the trauma. And then we have the firefighters. Those are the ones who are like the alcoholics, substance abuse, gambling, shopping addictions. They do this to protect themselves. And even though it's self-destructive, they're the ones that go, but did you die? You're welcome. That's what the firefighters do. I
Right.
know. It's
Right.
a way of surviving. And so the more the therapists start learning about this, they can then start incorporating that within the patients when they come in. So, yeah,
That's
anywho,
fascinating.
I
I want to do
know.
some more digging into internal family systems. I've heard of it. I've kind of dipped my toe into it, but yeah, I think maybe I'll spend some time
Yes, yes, it
educating
works.
myself around that. Sounds fascinating. Yeah.
It is. It works wonders with complex PTSD, dissociation as well, because when we work with dissociation, that's not something that I get into when it's that much. But parts work helps so much because at least you're talking to the part that's covering the trauma. Because a lot of therapists, the new ones, you might assume, okay, we go in and we just work with the trauma. Yeah, but whenever you have an army of defense mechanisms there hiding, in front of the trauma, that's the brick wall. So,
Absolutely. You'll know when you hit a nerve, right? Like, whoops.
oh, Too
Soon.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, definitely. I've
Yeah.
had,
Somebody
yeah.
will switch up on you pretty quick. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And
that's fascinating. So
yeah,
you kind of, it's been a journey for you then going from getting into the educational space, not really
yeah,
for me, to maybe a school counselor one-on-one, not really my cup of tea, to counseling and then niching down into EMDR, trauma
yeah,
work, and then internal family systems.
yeah, yeah.
And yet we're still not quite there where you got into dealing with empowering women. So what led you from there to here?
Yes. Oh my gosh, let me tell you. Okay. So then within the years of therapy, I started noticing that the women gravitated towards me and I would help them, with these tools, techniques. And I realized, oh my gosh, like I'm really good with this. I'm not so good with this, which is like another thing that therapists, when they're coming in, you have to know your strengths and weaknesses. And, number one, know your biases. If you do not know your biases, there's
Mm-hmm.
no way you're going to be a healthy, productive counselor. It's the same reason, it's the same thing as knowing your why you're entering into therapy. And it's not to heal you, it's to heal them. And so we all have our defense mechanisms, we all have triggers. But if you're not aware of those triggers, and then the biases within your culture or intergenerational belief system, and you see someone that is going against your biases, you could really harm a patient.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen where patients go into therapy where the therapist is anti-LGBT and then and that's a bias of theirs. And they
Mm-hmm.
know that the patient then discloses LGBT, issues or situations. This is where the therapist then can say, you know what, this is beyond my best practices. and it would be best to refer you with someone. We can work together to be able to find a right therapist for you, because we cannot see everybody. And so that's like,
That's really good advice. Really good advice, because I think a lot of times, especially for new therapists who aren't as familiar with countertransference, and they may have heard the term in graduate school, but they don't really. Sometimes they can catch you out of left field, because there's, talking about bias. There's something called implicit bias.
yeah,
There's bias, like you might say, "Oh, I'm a Christian," and if I get a client who's Jehovah's Witness, I know there's going to be some religious distinctions there, and I might want to watch myself, right? So I don't come off as
yes,
judgmental. But implicit bias is a little bit different, because it's kind of buried, meaning like it's a bias that we're not even necessarily cognitively aware of, right?
yeah,
We're not cognizant of, and then we have to be very careful. And that's why I think as we're learning the art of therapy, it's very, very, very important to keep checking in with ourselves. That's why in
yeah,
graduate school they have you process recordings, right? There's a reason behind it. It's not just busy work. It's so that you can process how you're thinking and feeling, so that those implicit biases can come up,
yeah.
and then you can identify them, so you know to be sensitive about them, so you know to check yourself before you engage, right? And
Yes,
so I think, like you
definitely.
said, we're not for everybody. Not every relationship with a client is going to be a good fit. And
Mhm.
that's just good practice, is when you can identify that and say, hey, this, could I see this person? Yes, but am I giving them the best option of treatment? Am I giving them their best, to my understanding? And if we can identify that it's, a high friction, or maybe it's differing values, that it's just going to be an impediment to their treatment, then the ethical thing to do is to refer out, for sure, without
Oh,
abandoning
yeah.
them.
Yes, of course. Best
Right.
practices, work together to find the right. I
Yes.
usually have my list and, work through those emotions, because you're right. They may feel like it's like a relationship, the relationship with with the therapist. It's like, oh my gosh, you're firing me, you're abandoning me, you're breaking up with me. And
Mm-hmm.
so working together for that. And, like for me, I'm well aware, because my niche is in people pleasing and empowering women in failed relationships become successful. The people that don't like me and I don't work well with are narcissists.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That makes
or
sense.
yeah, or narcissist traits. And that's okay.
Right.
I had to be aware of that. When I was beginning, I would see the males not I had a contract with CPS, and so they would
Mm-hmm.
just come in.
Mm.
And so the males would be so upset. And that's when I had to
Mm-hmm.
tell the caseworker, guess what? No, as much as you want to give them to me, they're not a good fit. And I'm not doing them justice. So you're gonna have to find them someone else. But I can see the spouse. And
Mm-hmm.
couples counseling the same way. I always recommend this. So every counselor's different. However, normally best practices is, if you're seeing in couples counseling, if you're seeing one person, then the other person sees another counselor, and then the couple see another one. So that way you collaborate with one another, and no one goes, oh my gosh, you're taking their side, you're taking my side. Now, again, does it mean that you don't have to? No, you can do that. But you have to really be an expert in couples counseling, and know that if you're seeing the one person individual, that those issues might come about. So, for me, best practices is, I see one person, whether it's couples or individual, but they have to see another counselor and for the couples, and I just collaborate with them and we work together, and it's worked amazing because of it. So, yeah.
That's great. What a great approach. And I think, again, that takes a lot of insight to know. Like, because
Yeah.
sometimes as a therapist, especially in private practice, if you're new, like sometimes it's hard to turn referrals away. Like when,
Yeah.
but I think also kind of knowing how you serve it your best is important.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and just being honest with yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you enough. One of the things that in the beginning, you're going to get patients that are just going to be mad at you. They're going to blame you for everything. They're going to walk away and leave and go, "Pff, you're no good." And this is where you get a support system with other counselors going, hey, let's debrief, because even regular MDs, whenever something happens, they do the M&M, and they debrief on the case. We need to debrief on cases as well to know, okay, what happened here? So the reason why I'm so insightful within myself is because it's not all bells and whistles, guys. It's this reality idealism that patient's going to come in 6 sessions later, boom, problem solved. That's just an irrational belief, because every case is different, and we're going to sometimes just miss the mark at times. And being compassionate to oneself, learning, not taking it personal, but also knowing, okay, what can I do next time? That is one of like top tips for therapists.
I love that.
Yeah.
Make sure you guys are taking notes here.
And that's how I
Definitely.
started going back. So I'm all ADHD here, all over the place. But no, it does have a lineage here. So going through those trials and tribulations, knowing, hey, you know what, I gravitate towards these type of demographics, type of niche. And then during COVID, because this is when it happened, during COVID, I was like, oh my gosh, like there's just so many people. I was getting burnout. Counseling burnout is a thing. I just
For sure.
can't. Yeah. I developed an autoimmune, and man, the statistics with counseling burnout and disorders and, diseases, it's just crazy. And so I was like, I need to do something. I need to work smart, not hard, and want to be able to reach my audience. And I remember my podcast first starting with conversations at work during COVID. Just here are some tips, here's some strategies to help you out during COVID. And then, stress, and just kind of playing around with it. But then I started noticing and just kind of looking, what is my audience? Like, what are my patient population? What is it I gravitate to? Who gravitates towards me? Where's my successes in that I'm getting when it comes to therapy? Who am I helping? So these are just questions that I was always reflecting within myself to try to better myself as a therapist. And that's when I realized that most of my demographics were women. They were normally within 30s to 50s. They were, had jobs, working class, and they were mostly in failed relationships. And then I noticed people pleasing. And I cannot tell you how that came about. I read a lot. And so some therapist somewhere, somehow, said about this, and it dawns in my like memory. I remember some of the parents telling me whenever there was CPS cases and situations with their kids, and they would say, but they liked them. What, if they hated them, why wouldn't they say something which showed that they liked them? And we came up with the Stockholm syndrome, how they would fall in love with the perpetrator and whatnot. And I said, well, what is this other, like, that always got to me, like, yeah, I mean, I know that. And that's how people pleasing came about. And I started learning about that, because back then it was just fight, flight, freeze. But then they started realizing, hey, wait a second, we have fun, we have appeasing, we have people pleasing. And so, this whole people pleasing thing started coming about as well. And I said, okay. And then looking at my audience, at my population of who I was helping, I noticed that was one of the biggest issues. And then I reflected within myself as well. Growing up in a household where my mother was a victim narcissist, mostly the men were narcissists themselves. And what did I learn to do? People please. And, it's a way to survive. And then what I realized, even after all this healing, was done, that behavior of fight, flight, freeze, people please, and appease, these are autonomic. They don't really go away. It's just defense mechanisms are there, like in the ego parts, IFS, but they're there to protect you. And you need to be aware of them so that way you can, stop and rethink and challenge and then do something else. And so I started learning how to do that. And, to be honest, one of the biggest things is having a support system. And my husband was like my number one supporter. You want to say this precedent, to who's a big people pleaser and say, you know what, I'm a people pleaser. I tend to people please. I tend to say yes and do things I don't like. So I just want you to be aware of that. That sometimes I may say yes when I mean no, and I'm going to maybe take a pause. I might rethink things. I just want you to know. And you want to say this to not a narcissist, to not someone's going to take you, someone that you can trust.
Right. Consider the audience, right?
Because definitely, imagínate, you're going to tell a
Safe people.
narcissist,
Yeah.
save people,
Yeah.
be vulnerable with the safe ones.
Well,
And
because a narcissist may look at that and use that as an advantage, like a leverage point, right? Oh, this person's easy to manipulate. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And they'll trust me. The narcissist will case you and they will spot you. And, knowing yourself is huge as a therapist and or as a people pleaser. And when I became aware of that, I was like, wait a second, whoa. And where I live, it's new because everything is new here. We get the stuff like many years later. And I said, no, my people need to know this. My patients need to know this. And I just was researching everything. And then even my husband, like, let's say something as simple as this, guys. Well, I say, what do you want to eat? Because, partners are always wanting to know what the other person wants to eat.
Of course, of course.
And I
It's
don't
like a
know,
2-hour
right?
conversation. What do you?
I know, right?
What do
Oh
you-
my gosh. My husband will send me memes of like restaurants that says wherever. And I'm like, cállate. So, yeah, whenever I would say, let's say I wanted Chinese. And then he's like, yeah, I feel like barbecue. And I'm like, okay, we can do barbecue. And he looks at me and he says, no, you said you wanted Chinese. You don't go with what I say just because I want to go here doesn't mean you have to do what I say. You chose this, so therefore we're doing this. And I didn't even realize it. It was a reflex to be like, oh,
Right.
yeah. And, having that support system that will call you out, not in a shaming way, but in a very compassionate way. Hey, did you know you just did this? But no, don't worry. I got you. We're going to do and it's going to feel uncomfortable. Let me tell you. Because,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think about deferring, right? You defer to other people, are quick to compromise when they don't even ask you to, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And that's part of the
yeah.
people pleasing where your values, your needs, they come last. And it doesn't have to be trauma. It could be something as simple as intergenerational because we're women and we're the caregivers, we're the nurturers, we have to take care of the other
The
person.
narrative, right?
The narrative as it is. And luckily things are changing within this generation. So then we have the conflict of the past generation with this generation where they look at you and, oh my gosh, let me tell you. Oh, went to a family barbecue and, here the women are supposed to serve the men. I don't do that. I'm an empowered woman and he's got two good hands and two good feet. And
Right,
luckily he's very modern and he'll serve himself. And people are like, what I'm with my girls. I'm, dealing with my kids. And, he's feeding himself. If anything, he's like, hey, hon, what do you need? He's serving me. And people are just like, what is happening here? The world's going to end. So, yeah, when you say narrative, that's huge. And when it comes to people pleasing, where I am at now. So, people pleasing, like I said, one of the common things is I just want it to go away. And it doesn't work that way. Because one thing I always tell people is, can we break a habit? No, we can't break it. 'Cause people say, oh, break a habit, and you can't break it. We can merely replace it because we've got something called memory. Yeah. And so I go, people pleasing is always going to be there. What do we replace it with? Empowerment, with resilience, with authenticity. And so the journey where I'm at didn't happen one day to the other. It took years of, habits of learning myself. And it's a journey, not a destination. And so, in the end, what ended up happening during COVID, I started learning more and more. And that's when I said, okay, I'm going to focus on the nervous system, hence the neurobiology, which is the study of the brain and the body. Because of the EMDR, I needed to work what part of the brain works with what. How does the brain work when it comes to the nervous system? Using the neurosequential model of Dr. Bruce Perry, the brain works bottom up. You first have to calm your nervous system, then you can make connections, and then you can use the prefrontal cortex to rationalize. And so knowing these things, then I was able to kind of fine tune my therapy sessions, fine tune my niche. And man, the sessions and progress was like this, just learning.
I love that. I love that. So let's kind of dive into that for a second. For those therapists listening in right now who might be dealing with some people-pleasing behavior, what can we practically do in therapy? What kind of framework can we use to help equip and affect change with clients who are kind of stuck in that kind of behavior pattern?
Yeah, that loop of people pleasing, definitely, because that loop begins with checking the people. Are they happy, not happy? And if they're not happy, people pleasing kicks in as a survival skill. And so what I created with my framework, and again, it took a lot of, getting to know. There's two components I use, and you might know this for the new ones or seasoned therapists. When it comes to substance abuse, they use something called the stages of change. And then, of course, when it comes to grief, we use the stages of grief. So I don't know, the creativity in my ADHD is where I use my strengths. You apply the concept in different ways.
Sure.
Yeah. So then I realized, oh my gosh, it's the same thing. The people need to go where they at now. Okay. And so you have to do the intake, you do all the assessments, you see where they're at, you check the behavioral symptoms, you check their goals, and then you work with where are they right now? Where are they with the stages of change? Are they in the pre-contemplation? Do they not know where they're at, that they're people pleasers? Because let me tell you, when they come in and I go, oh, so you tend to do this, 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 and that, let's just talk about the behavior. And then I mentioned, did you know that that's an autonomic nervous response with people pleasing? And right away, it's like, I don't like that word. No.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that means that they're not yet ready. And then in the stages of grief, because you got to work on becoming the person you are wanting to become. But in order to become, you have to let go of the person who you were. And again, let go is simply you can't, because they're still going to be there. But you don't want them to be front and center. You want to kind of put them in a happy place where they don't need to come out and they're happy where they're at. Because again, we have memory. And so the Star Wars, I love that movie. And the Yoda, he says, in order to create, we must destroy. And
I love it.
Yeah, we have to destroy the habits, the thoughts that go with it. And then we need to replace it with something else. And it's not it's not easy. So when they come in, you look at the behaviors, you look at the symptoms, you look at where their thought processes are, and just kind of gauge where they're at. If they're in denial, that's okay. They're in denial. We just mention what they're doing and where they're at. You set the treatment plan. By second session, you work with the interventions, whether it's CBT, EMDR, IFS, or whatever. And you gauge with where they're at, and then you work with those stages of change, but also the stages of grief of, are they willing to let go? And there's different components. Sometimes you're going to work with defense mechanisms. Sometimes using bottom up, because that's how therapy works. We first have to work on calming the nervous system. How can they know to change when they can't even calm their nervous system? So
right, because if we're in a activated state, our critical thinking, our executive functioning doesn't work. We can't really go there because we're in survival mode. right? So
Yes,
first we have to
yes.
activate that,
Mhm.
tap the brakes on our nervous system, right?
Yep, yep, yep.
And
Exactly.
through grounding skills and mindfulness before we can do the deep work, for sure.
Oh, yeah. And, even then, sometimes you're going to spend several sessions and then some, and then you're going to go back. And, there's something that I give my patients when it comes to therapy. It's a paper that discusses the progress of therapy. It's not all linear. You're going to go, it's going to go great. And then you're just going to go like 2 steps forward or one
Hmm.
step forward, 2 steps back sometimes. And that's okay because everybody's different and has
Hmm.
nothing to do with you. It's just getting to know the process of the person. And the therapeutic relationship accounts for at least 70 to 80% of success.
Absolutely.
So,
That's what I
yeah.
learned.
Yeah.
The stats are in. Yeah. Healing. I remember
Yes.
in grad school, my teacher always say healing takes place in the context of the relationship,
Yeah.
regardless of the intervention. Like the interventions are important, but if there's not rapport, then nothing's really going to work.
Yeah, seek to
Yeah.
understand before you can be understood. And so
Hmm.
our number one job for, therapists is we seek to understand. We're curious. We don't put in our biases. And then they'll be able to understand us and be able to, be vulnerable enough to listen to the strategies we give them.
Right. Wonderful. Wonderful advice. Absolutely. And that's the beautiful thing about human behavior is it hasn't changed since the dawn of time, right? A lot of other things
Yeah.
change, but
Yeah.
people, I mean, look at any piece of ancient literature on human behavior, like whether it's meditations or um, even like Napoleon Hill's work in the 1920s, like
Yeah.
the Bible. I mean, human behavior is not. I mean,
Yes.
as it's recorded, has not really changed. How we respond to
No.
stress hasn't really changed. How we
Yeah.
respond to threat. How we
Yeah.
do relationships.
Yeah.
The stage may change a bit, but not how we play on it.
No.
So that's what
Yeah.
makes therapy so wonderful is that as we learn, we can teach, about points of
Yes.
intervention on human behavior as we can
Yes.
help clients and other therapists seek to understand the self, we can affect change. Right? But it all
Oh,
starts with
yeah.
seeking understanding, like you said.
That's it. Yeah. And I know that one of the new things I started getting into last year, I became certified as a clinical service provider in ADHD.
Hmm.
And, some of the things I realized was as a people pleaser, I was like, like I'm going bottom up, but yet the rational part isn't working as much. Like what's happening? And, we'll get it. But, I knew there was something.
Hmm.
So, and behold, I got to know about ADHD, and like you said, it's been going on for years. I was reading up on the history of it, and even Socrates would write about, oh, there's these type of people that are just like they're just so restless, and they just all over the place, and they're not
Mm.
able to just think. And I'm like, wow, ADHD has been going on for years, thousands of years, and they just call it something else. Well,
Sure.
once I realized the biological component of ADHD and how there is a deficit in the executive functioning skills biologically, and once we were able to work on that component, whoa, like progress was night and day.
Hmm.
And I was just like floored, which begs to say that we never know everything. And we're always learning on progress of therapy and different things that can put into play with situations like in people pleasing.
I love it. I love it, 100%.
Yeah.
And everything you shared, your journey into this space, and I think it's really going to be a benefit to all of the other therapists, especially the new therapists listening in or watching.
Yeah.
That it's a journey. Just understand, like as you get clock time with different types of issues,
Yeah.
different types of clients, you will get a feel for where you find the most energy, where you feel most passionate about helping, and then you can zero in onto your preferred niche, right? But
Yeah.
nothing is ever set in stone,
No.
and you'll find your way. And that's the interesting thing about therapy is it's as much of an art as it is a science.
Yeah.
you know? And if we get too hung up on the protocols and checking the boxes, sometimes we lose the big picture in working with clients, and that is that we're holding space,
Yeah.
that we are, again, seeking to understand in a
Yeah.
non-judgmental way with unconditional positive regard, and we will find our happy place in terms of where we like to work with clients, right?
Definitely.
And if you are working with clients who are dealing with passivity, people-pleasing behavior, anxious attachment styles, definitely reach out to Anita. She's got a wealth of resources for you there. We shared her website, her podcast, her YouTube channel, everything she's doing there. You can check out her book. But of course, get in touch with Anita if there is any help you need there, and I'm sure you'll gain a lot of wisdom and some good practical action steps, you know, in the work you're doing. If you have any clients who are struggling with people-pleasing behavior, definitely send them her way for some good resources, and her resource library, which is free.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And even in the podcast, what I ended up doing, I set a series of people pleasing, part one, two, three. So that way now even my own patients, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do you one even better. So you don't have to be paying so much for therapy just to know the psychoeducation part of it. Listen to this podcast, and it's a 3-part series. And let me tell you, they binged like, oh my gosh, I was binging all these episodes and I had no idea about
Right.
all this, people pleasing part. And then of course, the fear of rejection, the pain of abandonment, which is part of people pleasing, how to get rid of Mr. Right. I mean, Mr. Wrong, and find Mr. Right, because these are common symptoms of people pleasing. But first and foremost, I send them to what is people pleasing, part 1, 2, and 3.
Here it is. I see it. Part
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah. And so that way, when they come back to you in therapy, they already know the education part, and now the real work starts with, okay, so if they're in denial, that's where I send them. I'm like, okay, well, you know what? Just listen to this episode, humor me. And if it's not you, that's okay. And for the most part, when they listen to that episode, they come back going, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was people pleasing. And that really resonated with me. And my partner does this and I do this. So that's what's been so helpful with the success of therapy as well.
Oh, and again, thank you for the work you're doing. And this is, I think, I'm on a mission to nudge other therapists into using platforms like this to
Yes.
help more people, right?
Yeah.
And again, therapy is not, obviously podcast is not therapy, Instagram's not therapy, YouTube's not therapy, but it's a resource library.
Yeah.
It is a resource library. We're in a world where people are thirsty for practical knowledge, right? Not just more sound bites. And
Yeah.
who better than to deliver that than people who are in the trenches doing the
Yes.
work, right?
Yes. We're not AI.
Exactly.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Real people.
Yes, we are people. I say, people ask what I do, because, in social work or therapy, like that word has so many connotations to it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just say, I solve people puzzles.
Yes, yes, we're problem solvers, definitely. And I think that's why I love it so much, because, I love puzzles, and
Right.
wow, I'll be like, okay, they're here, they're here, they're here. And I know, I just I get too into it. It just, my mole, as I like to say it, it's my thing. So
I
yeah,
love it. Well, thank you for the work you're doing. Keep it up, Anita. And you're always welcome on the podcast. Just tap
thank
my
you.
shoulder.
Thank you
And
for
look forward to seeing all you do down the road as well.
thank you.
Well, until next time, have a great week. Keep thriving. And remember, stay curious and
Yes.
live your best life.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you. Hey, if you're getting value from this content and you haven't done so already, be sure to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel and podcast. And be sure to subscribe to the MHT newsletter. That way you don't miss out on any new content as it's released. Links in the description.